Okay, so once again, good morning to everyone. We are really sorry for the delay, but as you know, this is the Chaos Communication Congress. Chaos is part of the show. In any case, we are ready to start. Our first speaker for the day, this is a talk that I'm personally very excited about, very interesting in my opinion. Our first speaker is an architect. He is a professor of spatial and visual cultures and the director of forensic architecture at Goldsmiths University in London. Please give a big round of applause to Eyal Weizman.
Excited to be here, my first Congress actually, and I'm sure it's going to bring good luck, the fact that we had some technical problem right now. I'm running in London something that is better described as a counter-forensic agency, as a civil society counter-forensic agency. There's no better way to explain what counter-forensics is, a certain turning around, repurposing of the forensic gaze towards the state, than looking at a series of issues where security forces or the police are the perpetrator. So what I'm going to show you today, very fast, are three cases. The first one in Israel, second one in Germany, third one in Mexico. Each one involves violence or alleged violence by the police. And each one also involves a different mode of research and technique in doing so. The first one is a place where I come from, Israel, Palestine, and the issue is really the forced eviction of Bedouin communities that have been living in the north part of the Nakab or Negev desert in the south of Israel for generations, now declared by the state to be illegally occupying those places and are subject to continuous raids by which the police... Oh, you don't see the slides. Slide, guys? Okay. Sorry, 1 second. We don't see... All right, so I'll tell you a little bit more about forensic architecture until they do so. Basically, what we are is a group of architects, filmmakers, some investigative journalists, coders, and we joined together to create a forensic agency. So it was a kind of an experiment that we started around 2010. Because we felt that both technological and political changes enabled and demanded a form of counter-forensics that we are now practicing. Initially, we were working in conflict zones. Starting really in this millennium, in the year 2000, war became an urban phenomenon. Almost all conflicts that we were looking at took place in cities, in and amongst buildings. So in a very straightforward way, just like a medical doctor, a physician can turn into a pathologist, we architects, we're turning the tools of our trade, understanding of building, a way of interpreting its materiality, its physicality, into an evidentiary technique. So initially, what we were doing was a kind of archaeology of the very recent past, or archaeology of the present. This is a term by Gilles Deleuze, and looking at piles of ruin of a building that was destroyed in a bomb or in a firefight, and trying to read from the disposition of the rubble something about what has taken place within and around it. So it started as a kind of an archaeological practice, but then then again, very often when we start working in conflict zones, and the first projects we had were in Palestine, and then we were working to uncover drone warfare in the Pakistan-Afghanistan frontier, we realized very fast. Sorry.
The presentation on this.
Should I what?
The presentation on that stick, so we can use this laptop.
Oh, this is going to take 20 minutes to pass them on.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, because I started to put it on a stick, and listen, can you connect this? I'm going to do something else.
This is connected. Can you?
If you can get an image from this, I'm just going to run things from my website. And
do I have internet here? What's the internet?
So as I said, the first level of our work was archaeological, material archaeology, trying to uncover what has taken place, where people were. But increasingly, we realized that we cannot really get to the places where it was most important for us to research. That states, when they violate human rights or, okay.
If you want, you can.
Okay, thank you very much. Often also do two things. They close the area to any investigator, any human rights group, or anyone that works to collect evidence against them, and they limit the ability of signal to come out of them. This is actually what happened in 2008, 2009 in Gaza. Very little signal was coming out of Gaza under attack by Israeli forces. And this is what happened when at the beginning of the American drone strike campaign in Pakistan, Afghanistan. They were effectively limiting it. So what we had to do, and this is what you're going to start seeing, is to undertake archaeology through looking at media and interpreting really the kind of flood of social media images that were coming our way. Sorry, I'm not used to this. Okay. Okay, so the first example I would like to show you is work we've done with a Palestinian human rights organization, Al-Mizan, and Amnesty in Gaza in 2014. We could not go. We asked for permission to go to Gaza at the time. Our access was denied, and all we had was about 70,000 images that we have collected during that day. And what we had to do really is tell a story of one day, August 1st, 2014, morning to evening, which was the most violent and the day where most Palestinian casualties were sustained. What we didn't have was the metadata on those clips and images, because of course they were harvested either from mainstream or social media. And we effectively had to develop a technique to look at the bomb clouds themselves, to look at and compose the architecture of the bomb cloud plumes in order to see and collect images that refer to the same explosion, and back from there to determine the time and place of each one of those bombs. So those bomb clouds were for us the metadata. They were kind of like physical metadata. Here is how we geolocate One of the images that we found, or one of the clips that we found, by comparing points on a perspective of the video with what we see on a satellite image, located the place where the photographer was, and by cross-referencing 3 of those of the same cloud, we managed to find the precise place where the bomb is finally landed. So this is effectively a way in which you can reconstruct metadata, a time-space location, from what we call physical clocks, that is to say, analog things that exist within the image itself. However, we could see other things on this photograph too. If we look at one of those images, here we have the videographer capturing 2 shadow lines in this photograph just a second before closing off the camera, and what we need to do is to try to establish the time. If we can establish the time on that image, and we know that form of the cloud is that time, we can triangulate on and establish the times of other videos, and then move further. So effectively, by building a 3D model and running a sun simulation on it, we could arrive at a very precise, within 5 minutes margin of error, time on that image. And now we know where this video was taken and what time it is taken in. There is, however, another, in the satellite image that we obtained, this is a kind of a very rare occasion, we saw an actual bomb on the satellite image. Again, this is something, the satellite image has metadata, and we started hunting for that bomb in images from the ground. Again, if we could locate that, what we see in the top view from a ground view, we will be able to start establishing times on this sequence. As you see, this sequence has metadata, but the metadata is wrongly set at around midnight. So we composed that kind of panorama of the sort of the bomb clouds of the city around that time, and we could identify that cloud. This is the cloud in side view. This is it in top view. We could find a precise location, a precise time, and then by confirming that is actually the same, we can move back and correct the digital metadata. So this is all techniques of actually establishing the very basic foundational stone of research, time-space relations between events. Here, for example, we could see in 2 different corners of the web, we find those images. We can verify it's the same camera by seeing the same scratch on the lens, correct the metadata, establish the time difference between them. And now here again, the same cameraman with the same scratch on the lens. And now we can compose a timeline of bombs during that day. And after that, of course, these kind of cloud atlases are a technique that was used by artists and by amateur meteorologists all the way from the 19th century on. What we did is creating that kind of archive of clouds, but here what you see is that we were able to convert them to information on the ground and then invert the image, move from cloud to city. What you see here, the model, is something that we call the architectural image complex. Architectural models are the only ways to make sense and to place those multiple images in space-time, so that we can navigate rather than edit them. We can navigate between one image and the other. What you've seen here is that on one of the images, looking so carefully at the bomb cloud, we start seeing 2 images in mid-fall. We found the craters where they have landed, and we could, for lawyers, calculate the kind of like the destruction radius there. You would see now again those horrific thing to see a bomb just split seconds before it landed on the ground and would kill 16 Palestinians and an entire family. But the lawyers asked for the size of that bomb in order to bring in a kind of a supply chain action on it. When we see that on the photo frame, we can locate the photo frame within the model of the city and actually measure those bombs in a very precise, with a very small, under 10% margin of error, and then go to the catalog and find exactly which bomb it was that landed, and that would enable activists to go after the manufacturer or after the policy of doing that. So again, here we are moving within the model with thermodynamic specialists. We look at the way the cloud is changing in order to really realize we're looking at the same clouds. We're picking up now images and events within the city as clouds being the anchors of the reconstruction. And that project has in fact gone later to, as evidence, was submitted to the ICC, to the International Criminal Court, and was used in various other forms of activism on the ground, and to a certain extent might have contributed to a change of policy by the IDF about the Hannibal directives, something that they've enacted during that day. And the bomb cloud were also something that was very important, were also like memory anchors. The witnesses on the ground remembered and could sequence their movement according to those bomb clouds. So think about an element that combines and ties together material evidence, media evidence, and memory evidence at the same time. So I'm basically just improvising. It's not at all the lecture I wanted to show you before. Here is a very recent investigation we've undertaken in Cameroon, and where together again with Amnesty International we were able to expose a secret detention center run by the Cameroonian military, that where Boko Haram prisoners or suspects of Boko Haram prisoners were actually tortured. We had access to people in Cameroonian prisons. It was a very rare occasion. We were able to actually send questions back and forth and reconstruct the architecture of the prison and the conditions of incarceration. But what became very important through the questions that we continuously posed and continuously received from those suspects is that they've actually seen, and at the beginning we did not know if this was correct or not. They were obviously seeing people being tortured and killed outside of their detention center. But at some point, they also confirmed seeing something different. American soldiers that were present on the site. Now, as you know, the US has claimed that it has stopped rendition and stopped involvement in torture. But this is something that we started very closely digging in to see whether we could find any traces of US soldiers and other European militaries involved within that sort of incarceration and torture of Boko Haram suspect. First thing that we saw, that we noticed was, and sometimes traces are left in the most kind of unexpected of places. A contract, an American contract to connect that base to the internet. The minute that we saw that, that was on the public domain, we started following on Facebook and seeing some American soldiers actually forgot to disconnect the location tagging, and you know, they're kind of like holiday photographs could be very easily located onto the base. Again, we've built a model of the base in order to confirm precisely where each one of the photographs was taken, and that we could see that they had access to the entire base. Again, a base where people are executed, tortured, etc. And then track the unit, and as you see, the site is actually under construction. Something that we could not believe seeing was American soldiers training the unit that is doing those atrocities. And here in this almost comical film, they train them in night vision equipment by playing football. So they all play football in the dark with night vision, and you could see that the sort of the involvement is very very direct. So that the exposure of that base led to a sort of a full American, at the beginning, denial, always denial, then admission, then now a full investigation by the U.S. about this these allegations. Another important case that we were involved with recently is the Iot Napa case. I think maybe many of you know the story of the 43 students, Mexican students, that were forcefully disappeared in Mexico. We were asked by the parents and by other civil society group to, in fact, investigate that. It's one of the biggest controversies in Mexico right now. Still, although it's 3 years since the disappearance, students involved in very grassroots left-wing politics entered into a city that was very much involved in narcos trade, and were destroyed by the police, the military, and organized crime. What we've done here is not really collect new evidence, but look at thousands and thousands of existing reports, and wanting, in fact, to data mine them. There were, hundreds and thousands of documents, and the only way to make sense of them was actually to look at relations between different events in space-time. The relations between all phone calls, photographs, movements of cars, and gunshot started creating a very different picture than the Mexican government was willing to admit, and that is that there was some local gang or local sort of organized crime group that was in charge of these actions. So we created a platform in which we placed every named actor in space-time, a timeline, and all the communication, so that we could start seeing relation between evidence. Often, it's not a bit of evidence in itself. It's not the casing or a gunshot that matters, but actually patterns, coordinations, and patterns of escalations and other things that actually expose what was going on. And we could show really a direct involvement between three different police forces and the military and organized crime at the same time. The location of all CCTV cameras that were there and removed, and somehow the relationship between phone calls and attacks became most clear indication of command and control, i.e. that these events were actually coordinated by the police. Here we are analyzing CCTV cameras, and what they would have seen. Of course, the state immediately after the event erased every CCTV camera that existed, that was available in the city, and they said, oh, they didn't show anything. We could show exactly what they would have shown at that moment. Another element to this is so this is the platform. You can actually go and explore it yourself. Rather than a sort of like a work with images, as I said, this is a work with data. And one of the most important drawing, and in fact became one of the very influential drawing during that in our investigation, was a kind of a working drawing that we kept for ourselves, because we had to keep track of where every agent was, what was the relationship between them, and also the multiple narratives that were told. So we kind of kept a very, very long drawing at the office, plotting the movement of different actors, until at some point we realized that what we were drawing, that working drawing, became in fact an image of disappearance. Because disappearance is not about, enforced disappearance of people is not only about grabbing people, killing them and hiding the bodies. Disappearance is also an attack on evidence. It's the continuous withdrawal and destruction of evidence. It is the introduction of false narratives and subterfuge. So disappearance is in fact a narrative form in itself, and so here, that drawing, we could actually kind of like show how the state narrative here in black, I'm not going to go exactly into what everything means because we lost a lot of time in this presentation, but these are the movement of the students according to the state narrative, a state narrative that is still officially holding, although it's being currently revised in response to many things, but including also our investigation. And now you would see the victim, the survivor's narrative, completely different. They enter the city at a completely different time. They move through it, and the divergence between the black and the red narrative, in fact, is the space of denial and disappearance. Disappearance as an ongoing crime, disappearance as a crime, on narrative, etc. I'm going to skip forward just so that you can see how the drawing is built up with another here on top. The purple images are the purple lines are those of the narcos, and so each one tells a different story, and the multiple stories are in fact the that kind of space of disappearance. Here you would see these are movements of police throughout the city, and you would see how that police force is precisely next to the students all throughout the attack, and moving along with them. In fact, what we have finally done, and this is now green is the military, etc., is built that we knew about the yeah, where is it? Mural. So this is the complete drawing that we've actually printed as an enormous mural. In Mexico, murals are kind of sites of political pedagogy. You can think about Diego Rivera's great murals in Mexico and the US, where there are narratives about the history of the state and about the struggle of the working class. In a certain sense, we thought that this is a kind of a mural of the 20th century, or 21st century, if you like, a kind of a data mural that is complicated to read, but its complication is in fact the image of disappearance. The entangled line and interruptions within it is what makes that space hold on. Exhibition. I want to show you the image of that mural in the space, and it has become ever since a kind of a site of political assembly and political activism, of protest for the families and others. And it kind of shows for us the use of cultural and art spaces in the context of our work. Indexes another problem in counterforensic. Very often our evidence cannot enter the very official spaces of state justice. They cannot, it's very rare that one can actually take the state or challenge the state legally in its own institutions. What we need to establish are alternative forums, and for us these could be public spaces, exhibitions, etc. I think some of you might know about the work that we've done on the NSU, on the Teme, or the Verfassungsschutz agent that was suspected to be present in an internet cafe in Kassel during the time of a racist killing, and us showing that he was there. He could not have missed this event. That was presented in Documenta, and Documenta offered for us another very interesting forum, that the fact it was shown there has in fact mobilized the process, including in the in a German federal investigation, and also in a Hessen parliamentary investigation, where different delegations from these from this parliamentary investigation actually came to Documenta to see it. And finally, that work was presented to Teme. He was forced to look at it and to comment upon it. I think I should probably leave some time to question. I'm sorry about the chaotic presentation, but I guess this is the nature of this event, so I'm happy to have had at least a chance to present to you some work. Thanks for listening.
So thank you, Eyal, for a very interesting talk, despite all the difficulties.
No problem.
If you have any questions, then there are 4 microphones here in the central aisle and 2 on the side, and you can line up and ask your questions. And first question, microphone number 1.
How much has any official state tried to shut down your investigations because it hit a nerve?
Well, this is... Shutdown is a complicated term. First of all, we face interruptions initially in not being allowed access to sites, and this is very much the question in the West Bank and Gaza. Our investigators, when they land in Tel Aviv airport, sometimes are interrogated, sometimes they're turned around. Nothing of that is comparable to what the Israeli state would have done if these were Palestinians trying to do the same thing. So to a certain extent, me being an Israeli Jew, I'm privileged by the state, and the attempt is to use those privileges to undo those privileges to a certain extent. We continuously had interruptions from the FBI, for example, when we did the white phosphorus research that included work on their attack in Fallujah, Iraq, with white phosphorus. We had some of our collaborators in the US's home being raided. We have, we kind of like being trolled and threatened, but it's a kind of a continuous sort of dance of us being to kind of protect our staff, protect our data, and attempts to penetrate it, attempts to smear us on the public domain, and very little victories sometimes.
Microphone 4.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. Two-part question here. The first one is about the framework. If you develop it, especially for this case, if you have it available, if you are doing new ones for each research, if it's one. And the second part is, how do you sustain yourself financially?
Okay, actually it's the same question because our aim is to develop new evidentiary techniques, so we kind of never do the same investigation twice, or we never use the same methodologies twice. What we do, after we develop any software, is that we put it on the public domain, we put it as an open source code, and or if it is kind of techniques of more architectural or editing, image-based techniques, we have academies, we teach activists how to do it. So we try, whenever we work with partners on the ground, to leave capacity behind us. And that is also the reason, or what enables this to us, is that we are sustained on research grants rather than only on commissions. Although, you know, I mean, if a prosecutor, human rights group, or any other civil society group would like to commission us, we would, they would pay for part of the investigation, but the large part of it is actually research grants that are translated into open source stuff, and the investigations are being put on the public domain. It's kind of, when you look at our videos, they're a little bit like cooking programs, because they both tell you what we find and they tell you exactly how to do it. It's kind of take you step by step. This is what you do here, then that, then this, etc., etc.
Microphone number 4.
Thank you so much for your work on this. My question is, like, how would any one of us be able to get involved in this and support you in one way or another?
In fact, we are now about 15 architects, coders, and filmmakers, and we are recruiting because we're growing. I will stay here for the day, so anyone that wants to come and work with us in London or remotely, I'll be delighted to speak to you.
Yes, from 4.
Yeah. Go ahead. I have a question about which tools do you use, about which techniques and tools do you use to perform the 3D reconstruction, and if you partner with any kind of company that already has that data and already does in-mass 3D reconstruction as a baseline.
We started doing now photogrammetry as 3D reconstruction from existing open source images. So imagine, you know, a place in Syria, let's say, that has been photographed or videoed by many users. We are able to reconstruct it. In fact, this is one of the techniques we use in order to identify the gas attack on Han Shahdoun in Syria by the regime forces, reconstructing precisely to the millimeter the shape of the crater, and we were able to reconstruct from it the level of explosives, etc., and that they were fitting only that particular rocket. We don't really work together with companies. We try to take existing softwares and kind of like adjust them to our aim. But initially, what I want to leave you with is the question of why architecture. Why architecture is really important here. In a situation when you don't have only like 2 images of a scene, let's say police brutality or an attack on a city, etc., but you have 70,000, and you need to cross-reference them, and you need to place them within a space, the only way to do it is in architectural models. Architecture is like the optical device that allows us to sync up and locate, you know, those cameras that are in space and moving in space. So it is really the necessity of work of architects, filmmakers, and coders is fundamental, because space replaces the kind of modernist montage as a relation to images. Montage is the edits in the film that is kind of, you know, the basic of cinema, of political cinema, the dialectic montage, if you like. You splice film and put it together. That makes no sense for us, because we need to move within space, pick up one film, not to cut it. We never cut the films that we just leave them within the model in the full duration, but the investigator can move and navigate in space and time between them. And as I showed you in the Mexico case, you know, these are like tens and tens of thousands of data points that create kind of intersections between data, image, and architecture that where the story starts to be to unfold at all. So yeah.
More questions? Microphone 3.
When you publish the videos and the time and place from which they were taken, how do you ensure that you do not put in danger the people who do the videos?
Yeah, this is a really good question. The work to sync up those 70,000 images from Gaza took us a year. Think about it. A year, we're working a year on one day. That's about the right kind of ratio in forensic time that we are operating within it. What protects people during war and during when they will do it will never place their location, but months after the conflict, it was deemed by our partners in Palestine and by our partners in Amnesty that this is safe to do without going back to each source and in fact asking them. We would never do it in real time though.
Microphone 4.
Yes. The work you do strikes me as very similar to what Bellingcat do.
Yeah.
So can you comment on how forensic architecture compares to Bellingcat?
No, we work a lot with Bellingcat and Iot. I mean, some of our projects are together. I guess that the difference is not, we engage more in sort of big environment and kind of like data analysis from many sort of data points where architecture or architectural models are the kind of the arena that holds and cross-reference all those images together. The overlap in our work really is a kind of image identification. What do we see? Where the image is located, etc. And on these issues, we work with them together. We tend to work more against states, Western states, militaries. Holding them to account, we feel, is that these techniques are actually much more useful directed at the British, American, Israeli militaries, and that we are able also to draw responses that are effective in these fields. And I guess Bellingcat has a slightly different sort of field in which they work.
Okay, I think with that, that will be our last question. So again, a big round of applause to Eyal for a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.